someone tells you not to think about it. Maybe it's a friend saying, don't worry about the interview. Maybe it's you, lying in bed, telling yourself, just don't think about that thing you said. And almost immediately, something strange happens. The thought you were told to avoid doesn't fade into the background. It gets louder. Sharper. More present than it was 30 seconds ago, before anyone brought it up at all. This happens constantly, in small everyday ways. You try not to think about an embarrassing moment from years ago, and it surfaces anyway, right in the middle of something unrelated. You try not to worry about an event coming up tomorrow, and the worry keeps circling back, again and again, as if it refuses to take the hint. You try not to think about someone you're trying to move on from, and somehow every song, every street corner, every quiet moment seems to lead straight back to them. None of these situations involve any real danger or high stakes in the moment, just an ordinary thought, and an ordinary instruction to make it go away. Yet the instruction was simple, don't think about it. And the thought keeps finding its way back to the front of your mind anyway. Here's the paradox at the center of all of this. To avoid thinking about something, your mind first has to know what it is. And to check whether you're succeeding, whether the forbidden thought has managed to sneak back in, some part of your mind has to keep watching for exactly that thought. Which means the instruction, don't think about it, doesn't remove the thought from your mental workspace. It gives your mind a new job, keep checking whether this specific thing is showing up. And checking for something requires holding on to a representation of the very thing you're trying to get rid of. There's a useful way to picture what's actually happening here. Imagine trying to guard a door by repeatedly checking whether the very thing you're guarding against has slipped through. Every single check requires picturing what you're checking for, even for a fraction of a second. You can't confirm something is absent without briefly holding a representation of it in mind. Repeat that check often enough, and the thing you're supposedly keeping out never really leaves your attention. It keeps reappearing, in brief flashes, exactly at the moments you're checking for it. Psychologists have actually tested this directly, in a study that's become something of a classic. Participants were asked to do one simple thing for several minutes, try not to think about a white bear. Whenever the thought of a white bear entered their mind anyway, they were asked to ring a bell. People rang that bell far more than they expected to. Trying not to think about the bear did not make the bear disappear. And then came the more surprising part. After the suppression period ended, when participants were told they could now think about the white bear freely, they reported thinking about it even more than a comparison group who had been told to think about the white bear from the very beginning. The bear came back louder, in the phase right after suppression, than it would have if no one had ever tried to suppress it at all. Why would trying to push a thought away lead to it returning more, once the pushing stops? One influential explanation, developed by researchers studying mental control, treats deliberate suppression as involving two separate processes working at the same time. One process does the effortful work, actively trying to redirect your attention somewhere else, away from the unwanted thought. The other process runs in the background, checking, essentially asking, is the unwanted thought showing up right now? That monitoring process needs to keep a kind of live search running for the very thing you're trying not to think about. Under normal circumstances, the effortful redirecting process can usually keep the upper hand. But when your mental resources are already stretched thin, when you're tired, distracted, stressed, or juggling something else demanding your attention, that effortful process has less capacity to do its job well, while the monitoring process keeps running regardless. The unwanted thought can slip through more easily, and once suppression finally ends and you stop actively redirecting, that background monitoring can leave the thought unusually accessible, ready to resurface. It's worth being careful here about exactly what the evidence supports, because it's easy to overstate. It isn't the case that trying not to think about something reliably makes it stronger in the moment, every single time. Research looking specifically at immediate effects during suppression has found that pattern to be fairly inconsistent. It tends to show up mainly when someone is already under some kind of cognitive load, juggling other mental demands at the same time as trying to suppress the thought. What's far more consistently supported, across a wide range of studies, is the rebound that happens afterward, once active suppression stops, the previously unwanted thought tends to come back with noticeably more frequency than it would have if it had never been suppressed in the first place. The paradox isn't so much, trying not to think about it makes it worse right now. It's closer to, trying not to think about it can set up a stronger return later, once you stop trying. This same basic pattern has been explored well beyond a bear in a laboratory. Researchers have looked at similar suppression and rebound dynamics in situations like trying not to worry right before falling asleep, or trying to resist thinking about a craving. The specific strength of the effect varies by situation, and not every domain shows the same pattern as clearly, but the underlying shape keeps showing up, effortful suppression, followed by a return that's often stronger than if suppression had never been attempted at all. None of this means suppression is doomed to fail every time, for everyone, in every situation. People do successfully redirect their attention away from unwanted thoughts constantly, and effortful redirection is not a hopeless strategy. What the research points to is something narrower and, honestly, more useful to understand. The specific mechanism of monitoring for an unwanted thought carries a cost, and that cost tends to show up as a rebound once the suppression effort ends, especially when mental resources were already stretched thin during the attempt. This changes what it means when an unwanted thought keeps circling back after you've tried hard to push it away. It's tempting to read that as a personal failure, as proof that your willpower isn't strong enough, or that something is wrong with how your mind handles control. But the thought returning isn't a verdict on your self-control. It's closer to an expected side effect of how deliberate mental control actually works. The same monitoring process that helps you check whether you've succeeded in avoiding a thought is, by its very nature, still holding that thought in mind. You weren't doing it wrong. You were running a system that was, in a very literal sense, built to keep half an eye on the exact thing it was trying to avoid. So the next time you catch yourself failing to stop thinking about something you were determined not to think about, it's worth remembering what's actually happening underneath the frustration. It isn't a broken brain, and it isn't a weak mind losing a fair fight. It's a mental control system doing two jobs at once, one job trying to look away, and one job quietly checking whether the looking away is working, and the second job, by design, never quite lets go of the thing it's watching for. The thought coming back isn't the system failing. It's the system working exactly as this kind of monitoring tends to work, once you finally let your guard down.